scale doesn't solve your problems, scale reveals your problems.
Our next guest dropped out of uni at the age of 18 and went on to become one of the hottest young entrepreneurs in the country.
Elevate will help you significantly increase the profit you generate from your business and enable you to do it in less time. The number one thing that any human being can do, particularly a business owner, is rewire your relationship with hard. You literally have to view discomfort as a signpost towards growth and success.
I've built businesses for nearly 2 decades, and I've never once seen someone succeed by waiting for permission. The kids who followed the rules end up working for the ones who didn't.
Now, to most people, taking home $3 to $5 million probably sounds attractive. But if you have to produce $100 million in revenue to get there, that is a fucking painful way to earn a living, and I'll tell you why.
Jack, you've mentored thousands of entrepreneurs through your business, The Entourage. What mindset shift do you think separates those that scale and those that stay at a small level?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And firstly, Simon and Sonia, thank you very much for having me. It's really good to be chatting with you guys today. The thing is with business is a game of growing from constraint to constraint. And so at any stage of business, the key question you need to be asking yourself is, what is the number one challenge in this business right now that when solved would make the biggest impact? And then you need to get very disciplined and ruthlessly focused to focus on only that, in addition to running the whirlwind of the day-to-day. What most business owners get wrong, and this is just a byproduct of, we're optimistic and we're in a hurry, but what we try to do is we try to do everything. And if you ask an entrepreneur, when do you want everything done by? If they're being honest with you, they'll say yesterday. And so it comes from a good place. It comes from optimism and being in a hurry. But what it ultimately means is that we try to do everything, and trying to do everything, we end up doing nothing. And so ironically, it's our need to go quickly that slows us down. And so regardless of your stage of business, if you can become skilled at identifying what's the number one constraint now and get busy working on that, almost to the neglect of everything else, unlock that constraint and then ask yourself the same question again. What's the number one challenge in this business right now that if solved would make the biggest difference? And then you get busy on that for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, however long it takes. And then you ask yourself the question again. And so business is just a game of growing from constraint to constraint. Most businesses think they've got a cash flow problem or a time problem. They don't. They have an attention allocation problem. They have a prioritization problem. They're trying to do everything, and in doing so, they're getting nothing done.
We all hear the word scale a lot. People love to say that word scale in business. How do you describe that? What is scale?
Well, scale is something that is fundamentally misunderstood. People think that if I just scale revenue, then all my problems are solved. And there's many things that are wrong with that. The first thing that's wrong with it is scale doesn't solve your problems. Scale reveals your problems. Any problem that you have in the foundation or the infrastructure of your business, as you grow, those cracks will widen, get deeper, and become increasingly obvious and increasingly painful. And so we have this kind of scale at all costs type mindset, and it's an immature and an undeveloped mindset and way to approach business. You don't want scale for scale's sake, and you definitely don't want to just focus on revenue. I work with, as you said at the top of the conversation, Simon, I don't know, I speak to tens of thousands of businesses every year. I see inside of, probably in the vicinity of 500 businesses a year. And whenever I say to a business owner, what's the North Star? Where would we love to be in 5 years, 3 years, whatever it is? They give me a revenue goal. And the revenue goal 9 times out of 10 is 100 million. We want to get to 100 million in revenue. And we have a conversation about where their margin is, and they're operating at a 3 or a 5% margin. And so if they continue operating the way they are, they're going to get to 100 million in revenue, and they're going to be taking home $3 to $5 million. Now, to most people, taking home $3 to $5 million probably sounds attractive. But if you have to produce 100 million in revenue to get there, that is a fucking painful way to earn a living. And I'll tell you why. If you're doing 100 million in revenue and 5% margin, if you miss your targets by 5%, which you will probably do 9 years out of 10, your margin is gone. If you miss your target by 10%, which again is universally common, you're in the hole $5 million, right? And so revenue doesn't equal scale. Revenue doesn't equal success. I would rather a higher margin on a lower revenue, because a lower revenue means I can focus on less customers. I've got less headaches. I've got less problems. I've got less troubles. I've got more margin, which also gives us more insulation and more room for error and more insulation if, something happens to the economy or, an unforeseen event occurs. And so business owners have to stop thinking about revenue. I would much rather, and this is what I say to them. I say, when we catch up in a year's time or 2 years' time, I want to ask you that goal, and I want you to give me a profit figure, and you don't even know the revenue that you're doing because it's so secondary. You're only focusing on margin, and so we have to adopt a profit first approach to scale.
Jack, talk us through what advice would you give someone if they're listening to this podcast right now and they are in this situation? How would you help them scale?
The good news is that the change in paradigm that I'm talking about, if you've been operating your business just focused on top line revenue and you haven't been focused on maximizing margin, and the other byproduct of that is if you're not focused on maximizing margin, you're probably also not focused on maximizing your time. And so there's two things there. A, you're not maximizing the money, and B, I'd say 100 times out of 100, someone that's not maximizing the money, they're not maximizing the time either. And so the good news is that when you shift your focus to focus on margin and efficiency of time, there are wins everywhere. And so, for example, you probably employ too many people right now if all you've ever focused on is revenue. You probably haven't automated nearly as much stuff as you could inside of the business. Your prices are probably too low. And if you increase price, every dollar you increase the price by, that dollar falls straight to the bottom line. No more marketing, no more sales, no more delivery, no more customers, just straight to the bottom line. And so when you look at a business that isn't focused on margin, when you look at a business that isn't focused on maximizing their time, there are usually infinite ways to make significant improvements almost immediately.
You've grown businesses through booms and downturns. Right now, we're all in very uncertain times. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs right now steering their ships through these uncertain waters?
I mean, uncertain times are the best.
Yeah.
Because as business owners and entrepreneurs, the best time to make money and get ahead is when there are tectonic shifts underneath our feet. Why? Because we can move faster than anybody else. If you look at a medium-sized business or a large-sized business, like a corporation-level business, it takes them years to make any change, and chances are they're run by bureaucrats and people that are so disconnected from consumer that even the changes they make aren't going to be positive ones. In my inner circle of clients here at the Entourage, we've got about 400 clients, most of them $1 million business owners. Last year, they did about $800 million in sales in that year. This year, it'll be a lot more than that. And so we oversee and help build a lot of businesses. The number one period of growth for the businesses that are in my inner circle was COVID. And when COVID hit, you had some retail businesses, right? And this is like a black swan event overnight, can't open your doors tomorrow, all your revenue's gone. And so we had probably 25% of our client base thinking that it was game over. Business is dead. And so we spent a couple of weeks helping them strategize, helping them batten down the hatches, pivoting to online. And a lot of the businesses that thought they were going to die within a week had their best month ever the next month because we pivoted them to an e-commerce model rather than a shop front. And so they made all their sales online. And during COVID, everybody was buying online, so that helped as well. And so bad times are literally the best times. Now, that's not to say that they're fun.
Yeah.
Right. The bad times will probably be the hardest times for business. Like in terms of like, I'm uncomfortable and I'm uncertain and I'm sleeping a little bit less. Yeah, sure, cool. But if we fast forward 2 years, you will look back on that challenging time and you will realize that the most amount of growth in the business, not just quantitative kind of profit growth, but also developmental growth inside the team and inside of the operations, actually happened during that challenging time. Was it hard? Yes. Welcome to business.
So then, all right. So when things are sailing smoothly in 5 years' time, and then
when things are sailing smoothly, that's the fucking worst time for business
right.
owners.
So then what can we do then when things are sailing smoothly to get that mental,
seek out the hardest thing you could do at any given moment.
A lot of business owners hate that discomfort, right? And I think you find that stops them from progressing. So what would you say to someone to live in that discomfort?
Whenever we do anything worthwhile, we have to leave our comfort zone. When you move outside of your comfort zone, by definition, you're uncomfortable. The vast majority of human beings view discomfort as a signpost to stop and retreat. The universe was telling me it wasn't the right time, or it just got too stressful, or we point to discomfort as a reason to retreat. When the human mind comes up against hard, the one thing it wants to do is pull back into the old and familiar ways, because that's the brain's way of keeping us safe from a psychological perspective. And that comes from 10,000 years ago. And our human brain has not evolved 1% in 10,000 years. We're still operating with the same brain that we had when we were running away from saber-toothed tigers. And so when the human mind comes up against hard, the first thing it wants to do is retreat. And so the number one thing that any human being can do, particularly a business owner, is rewire your relationship with hard. You literally have to view discomfort as a signpost towards growth and success. Speaking personally, my most uncomfortable days is where I haven't delved deeply enough into a core challenge. I hate that because I've trained myself for years now to seek out where are the biggest problems, where are the biggest challenge, and then sit in the uncomfortability, sit in the pain of it long enough to change it and to influence it. And I've been in business for 20 years now. I've been around long enough to know that if you are not doing that, then the pain that you will eventually feel as a result of avoiding problems will be so much greater than the discomfort of getting on top of them now. That's why I dislike days where I'm not addressing real challenges, because I feel like I'm accruing a debt. Whereas any day spent wrestling uncomfortability, working on hard problems, solving difficult shit is a deposit in the bank account.
Jack, we both come from traditional media. We spent a long time in that business, a very powerful business for a long period of time. And that shift, as you mentioned, since COVID, it has been happening quite rapidly and quite quickly. And we're seeing now podcasting, and we're seeing great storytellers come to the forefront that may not have had the opportunity to actually tell their stories. I know this is a bit of a pivot in our conversation, but what's the value that you see in appearing on podcasts, hosting your own podcast? I guess the value of storytelling. What is it that you see in that as an entrepreneur?
Simon, could I be so bold as to ask you a question?
Go for it.
Why did you guys start this podcast?
Because, we did a lot of stupid stuff in traditional radio.
Yeah.
We did a lot of distraction content, right? So a lot of the conversations...
What do you mean stupid stuff?
Well,
really stupid stuff. Like we would sit in ice baths for 5 minutes as entertainment, right? Like what the fuck does that even do for anybody, right? So we were coached into doing things to distract audiences, right? So we weren't able to... If we suggested you as a guest 5 years ago, we would have been told, no. Why would we have him on, right? So that was a really frustrating period to go through in big machines like that, like you mentioned, those big corporate machines. But now we are able to all create the content that we believe in, that we want to, we want to talk to you. We choose to talk to you. We can choose not to talk to you, but we want to talk to you, right? This is coming from both of us.
Yeah.
And that's our power now to actually communicate. And that's everybody's power. Anybody can go and create a piece of content now on what they're passionate about. They don't have to listen to the old system. So that's probably where it comes from for me. But I'm interested from your point of view. Where do you see value in storytelling?
Yeah. I mean, mate, what I would say is I vehemently agree with everything you just said. I think people find traditional media really restricting in that, sometimes I might go on a morning show or something.
Yeah.
And I've got to condense a really important issue into
2 minutes.
Literally 20 and 30-second answers.
It's impossible.
How do you?
Yeah.
It's impossible, Sonia. That's the word. I mean, there's degrees of ability in doing that, but even if you're very good at condensing complex things into simple things, you can't get to the substance of an issue in 48 seconds before the next ad break. And so it's exactly what you said, mate. It's because what I hear from what you said is that you and Sonia have now put yourself in an environment, which is a very entrepreneurial thing to do. You've created it yourself, in an environment where your authenticity, your genuine curiosity, and your genuine interest is the driving force behind everything you're doing in this environment. And when you do that, it's felt. It's felt because you guys give a shit what you're talking about. And so the audience feels that. And as much as I kind of don't like this word because of how much of a cliche it's become, it's authenticity. Yeah. It's when you can show up and be your genuine self, either as the host or the person being interviewed, there's a realness to it. And we live in a world, particularly as a result of the traditional media landscape, that has become so incredibly fake, so incredibly manufactured. And specifically with regards to traditional media, a lot of the time the reporting lacks integrity and can be untrue a lot of the time because there's agendas at play. And so the least respected institution in America right now is traditional media.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that as well. I mean, you got to look at the way that it's produced, right? There's auto cues. There's systems behind that where what we're doing right now, the three of us are just sitting here. There's no auto cues. This
having
is not
a chat.
prepared. We're having a conversation, right?
Yeah.
And it's a bit warts and all, right? There's no perfections here.
That's the thing. And people love the ums and the ahs and the dialogue. And
it's real.
We talk over each other, because it feels like they're in a lounge room with us. And so the access is so much more real.
Yeah. Jack, I want to ask you, the landscape in business is changing. A lot of things are changing, just like we spoke about. What would your top 5 tips be in 2025 for someone? Like any habits maybe that they can implement or, I guess, to help them get ahead?
The most powerful thing anybody can do to improve themselves and their situation is to intentionally upgrade their self-identity. And what I mean by that is identity is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And so we all have this story running constantly of who we are and the flaws we have and all of this kind of stuff. The best book written on this subject is called The Big Leap by a guy called Gay Hendricks. And he talks about in every area of life, we kind of have this range, right? And whether it's happiness, relationships, money, career, size of audience, anything, we have this kind of baseline. And when we find ourselves becoming too happy, too successful, making too much money, audience got too big, what the brain says to itself is, I am coming into unfamiliar territory. Unfamiliar territory is unsafe. The brain has one job. It's not to make you happy and successful. It's to survive. It's to keep you alive. And so you've become more happy than you usually are, or your relationship is even better than it usually is, or you're making more money than you have historically. The thermostat kicks in and you go back to baseline. And so and same with the downward effect as well. If your relationship gets to a point where it's very bad, or you're deeply unhappy, or you're losing more money than you ever had, then the thermostat will kick in. You go, I have to change this. And you'll start to implement habits that will drive you back to your baseline. And so we all have this baseline, and then we have this internal thermostat that keeps us coming back to the baseline. The biggest power here is to recognize that we all have that upper limit problem, which is when we start to reach the upper limit, you have to anticipate for your brain to start looking for a way to quit and retreat. And when you can anticipate that, when you know it's coming, then when your brain starts telling you, maybe this has gotten too big, or relationships shouldn't feel this good, or what's around the next corner, or maybe I'm too happy, I'm not going to fit in with the rest of my peer group. When you can anticipate that that's going to come, you can say to yourself, that's my upper limit problem kicking in. That's the thermostat kicking in. And I'm going to choose to double down on the habits that got me from my baseline up to my upper limit, so that my old upper limit becomes my new normal, and that becomes my new baseline. And so it really comes back to the first thing we discussed, Sonia, which is rewiring your relationship with discomfort. If you want to be somebody of growth, you have to master living in discomfort. And so that's the first one. You asked for 5. I'm assuming you probably wanted a slightly shorter answer than that.
No, you don't need to go into all 5. I just figured I feel like 5, I always go back to 5 as a tip, because it always seems to embed in my brain when there's like a set of rules, if that makes sense. And so I don't know about you, Jack, but I always feel like once you have those rules, sometimes it makes it easier to go, okay, I've done that. What's next? And so that's why I always revert back to 5 or 3 or something, a simplified list. Yeah.
100%. I think that's super smart. Yeah, I think in my own life, I became a dad 2 years ago. I got married last year. I've been through so many fundamental shifts over the last couple of years that in my own kind of personal experience, this game of playing with identity and sharpening identity is so front of mind for me right now. And I find that it influences everything else. Yeah. If somebody can just wrestle with that discomfort of continuing up leveling themselves, then every area of their life will improve as a result of that. Your relationship will improve, your parenting will improve, your business and income will improve, your health and fitness will improve. Everything improves because the story you tell yourself about yourself has improved.
Yeah, it changes. Yeah. Jack, let's talk about your family. We actually had Simon Squibb on the podcast recently, and he told us he's not putting his son in school. He's pulled his son out. He was at school. He's pulled his son out of school. And I saw somewhere that you are not, you're thinking the same thing. You're not wanting to put your daughter into school. Is that right?
What business is Simon from?
Simon Squibb is in marketing, and he is he's basically now a influencer, or a creator, I'd say, over in the UK.
Yes.
And he has an audience now that is bigger than the BBC in the UK.
Yeah. Which isn't a high bar, by the way. But yeah.
No, that's true.
Exactly.
Take your
but
point.
He helps other people with their dreams. So he's the guy you see going around asking people on social, do you have a dream? And he helps them make it happen. And he thinks the education system is deeply flawed, and I think that's something that you two have in common.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, that's why I asked the question, because I recognised the name, but I didn't have a face to it. I now know exactly who you're talking about. My daughter will never go to school, and the reason for that is she was born in 2023. Our education system was literally designed 200 years ago. And education isn't teaching people what's relevant in 2025. If she went to school, and school is engineered to put you in university, she would come out of university in 2045. But we're not teaching what's relevant in 2025, much less 2045.
Yeah.
And so you've got this disconnect between how fast the world has moved and how slow education has moved. If you look at any field, look at the studio that you guys are in right now. Look at the setup that I have in this office. I've got 2 cameras, booms. If you look at computers, if you look at phones, if you look at pretty much any area, if you look at what we eat, if you look at the supplements that we take, if you look at gyms, they look so fundamentally different to how they did 50 years ago. You walk into a school, a classroom looks exactly the way it did 50 years ago.
So true.
Yeah.
Right? And so the world has changed. And if we think the world has changed already, wait until, what happens over the next 10 years. The other interesting truth that a lot of people don't often consider is my daughter will probably never learn how to drive a car because self-automatic driving will be the norm in, say, 3 to 5 years. And so she'll be 5 at that point. By the time she's 16, we're talking 14 years away. And self-driving cars will still exist, but it will be like when the automobile came out, you could still ride a horse if you wanted to, but most people just got a car. The same will be true for automatic cars and automatic driving is 99% of people will do that. Some people will still drive their car because they want to, but it'll be a bit like riding a horse. And so, to just put your kids in school and think that they're going to grow up following a similar trajectory to the one that we did is complete ignorance to what's going on in the world.
I think this is such an interesting time for all of us. You're here saying this. You're saying, you're a dad. You won't be putting your daughter through school. There are people listening to this thinking, okay, my kids are in school. They're in grade 1 or 2. What do I do? And then there are Uber drivers that are listening to this right now, and they're thinking, okay, so what am I going to be doing in 3 to 5 years' time? The world is shifting that quickly. The anxiety that is around that, there must be what would you say to those people that are feeling, okay, I'm hearing Jack say this. I'm hearing him say, okay, take your kid out of school. That what would you say to those people that would be feeling that, that would be feeling torn in that decision? Because we all feel it, right? We all feel this anxiety right now of the shift.
And I guess you need to upskill in some way. Like if you're that Uber driver, you need to be thinking about your next step.
Yep.
But if you're, say, a student, and I know I did the uni thing, came out of uni, and I'm going to be honest, it was a fucking waste of time because it didn't get me the job, Jack.
Tell us what you really think, Sonia.
Yeah, I fucking hated it. And I literally tell everyone, unless you're a doctor, unless you're a lawyer, there is absolutely no reason for you to go to university because it didn't get me my job. It didn't build my career.
But what got you your job? Was it your network?
I worked, exactly. While I was at uni, because I'm a hungry girl, I went and actively worked in the industry I wanted to be in. I wanted to be in live radio, and I actually wanted to be in film. I got that job and I hated it because it's really slow. I wanted something fast-paced. And I started working on the street team in radio, and I knew I wanted to be in that producing room, and I wanted to be around the people that we were speaking to and the talent, and I wanted to make the shows.
So it was your network, not your university
degree. It was my network
degree.
But what I did was I Googled people. I figured it out myself because the uni didn't teach us that. Uni didn't give me an option to have the internship, right? Like I had to go and find it. And I found everyone from my graduating class. I can count the people that actually work in the industry, and it's on one hand. It's probably 3 or 4 of us from my graduating class. And it's wild because nobody else is doing doing what we studied.
It might have been your network, but that wasn't the first domino. The first domino was you decided to go outside the four walls of university and become a person of value. And so degrees don't get jobs. Degrees haven't gotten jobs for 20 years. It's crazy to me that this is now becoming a conversation. Degrees haven't gotten jobs for 20 years. What gets jobs in today's environment is, have you become somebody of value, which really is what skills do you have that can contribute to the organization that you're approaching? And how do you get those skills? You do exactly what you did, Sonia. You go out and you take the initiative. You had to go out and create it for yourself. Well, that's what everybody needs to do. Like, I don't know anybody that had a career handed to them. I don't know anybody that had a successful business handed to them. This whole, I think we've still got a bit of a cultural hangover from, I don't know what it is, previous generations, where it's like, I should be entitled to having a really good job or having a successful business. It's like, man, nobody that's got a good job or a successful business ever had that thought ever. It was like, if anything is going to be, it's up to me and I need to go out and create it. And so to come back to the other question, Simon, with regards to Uber drivers, for example, I too share a concern around all of that. I think the antidote is this. The skill of the future is what is the number one thing you need to learn? You need to learn the macro skill of learning. And so, and again, this comes back to the discomfort thing. Most people never learn new skills because they can't tolerate the discomfort of sitting in front of YouTube for 24 hours and feeling like an idiot because they're learning something new and it's going over their head. Right? Anybody that is great at anything, like if you think of you guys, how well you are able to structure this conversation and how well it's able to flow, or, if you were in a radio booth, your ability to do a radio show incredibly well. I mean, you might have had a little bit of talent of that in the beginning, but where did the skill come from? It came from the 30,000 hours you spent doing it and wrestling it, and the nights you didn't sleep, but you still went in the next day anyway, or you had the flu and you still went in, and you did it so consistently that you built the skill, you built the muscle. That muscle going forward is going to be the ability to learn. And so if I was an Uber driver, what I would be doing right now, and it feels almost silly to say out loud when you start, because we all want to see the entire mountain, and you can't see the mountain. All you can see is 3 feet in front of you. If I was an Uber driver, this is what I would do. This Saturday, I would try and allocate 4 hours, and I would spend 4 hours on YouTube learning how to build AI agents. Even when I do that, and I'm not a tech person, but I've been in business for a long time, I feel like an idiot for those 4 hours. You feel inadequate, you feel stupid, you feel I'm not a technical person, why am I even bothering? You want to give up, you want to procrastinate. But it's the person that can sit down for those 4 hours, and it generally takes about 20 hours to learn a new skill. It's much less than what most people think. But it's not the intimidation of the skill, it's the emotional uncomfortability of keeping your bum on the seat long enough to learn it. And so how do you develop the ability to learn is choose one thing, spend 20 hours at it. You'll witness and observe how good you get at it in the first 20 hours, and then you'll become addicted to it because you'll be like, fuck.
Yeah.
You mean that I can spend 20 hours on anything, and 99.9% of what I need to know is on YouTube, or I can tweet the person on X, or I can send them a DM on Instagram, or, there's so many channels to learn. And so once you realize that you can, now you're in a different field.
Successful people, Jack, always seem to obsess over one or two things consistently. What is it that you obsess over every single day?
Mate, that is a exceptional question. Deep, uninterrupted work and tackling the biggest problems and challenges in my business and in my life. Those are the two things. And so let me talk to both of those briefly. most people go into the office or open their computer at home, and the first thing they do is they open their email inbox. Your email inbox is just a list of everybody else's priorities for you. It's a list of everybody else's to-dos for you. And so it's a really easy way to work because you don't have to think. You just open your emails and you respond to emails, you do a bit of admin, and then you get a call from a team member, and then it's lunchtime, and the whole day kind of pans out like this. And so the vast majority of people are spending all of their time reactively. When I say deep uninterrupted work, I do it for about 4 or 5 hours a day. I encourage other people to start with 2 hours a day. And what that means is this. 2 hours goes in your calendar 5 days a week. Even if it was 3, that's okay, but no less than 3. Recurring forever. And in those 2 hours, you are going to turn off the fucking phone, get out of your emails, turn off Slack, get out of Instagram, shut the blinds if you have to. All you need is this and this.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone's listening and not watching, you need a water bottle and a glass. That's it. And then you need to not move for 2 hours. And so you shut off all distractions and you work on the most important thing in your life or in your business or in your career that day. If you do 2 hours of deep, uninterrupted work proactively on the most important thing in your life and business 3 days a week, you will be in the top 0.1% of performers in your field. Full stop. The second component of working on the biggest challenge kind of ties into the 2 hour deep work because usually what I'm working on in those 2 hours is the biggest challenge. But if it's not, it comes back to that question, which is what's the biggest challenge right now that if solved would make the biggest difference? And I spend pretty much all my time doing one of those two things, either deep work or meeting with people and discussing and researching how to unlock the biggest challenge right now. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm freeing myself up to work on the most challenging problem at any given moment, which is the opposite of what most people do.
Jack, I want to ask you about how fatherhood's changed the way, I guess, you look at business. Has it changed the way you do business now?
Monumentally. And the reason for that is I've always been someone that's been so mission driven and business driven that it was for pretty much my whole life. It was not just the most important thing. It was almost like the only thing. Now, I've got a very good relationship with like my childhood family, for example. So I would still, see them and catch up with friends or whatever very occasionally. But it was like business was pretty much everything. And then I fell in love with Panda, who I think is the most exceptional person I've ever met. And then we had this daughter, Ariella, who, we just spent, her and I just spent 4 days away last weekend to give Panda a break. And when as I experienced that, business is no longer the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what that did for me is it sharpened me. I now had more to play for, and I had to become more efficient. I had to become more efficient in how I built businesses, and I had to become significantly more efficient with how I spent my time, because I'm not just optimizing for business growth anymore. I'm kind of optimizing and maximizing also, if not primarily, to spend really quality time with Panda and Ariella. And so that demanded that I make significant changes to how I go about business.
That's really sweet. I love how you talk about your family like that, because it is important, and it's something that I think we hear a lot from entrepreneurs who are just starting that journey. And I mean, I'm 36 now, and I've always said, I don't think I ever want kids. But the more I speak to people, the more they're like, oh, it's changed my whole life, And so I'm like, what are we missing here, But right now I think it would maybe slow me down, because I'm in that build stage where I feel like once you get there, then it's something that you would look at.
There's a lot behind your laugh there, Jack.
Yeah, I'm like, oh. It's a lot of work. It's a job in itself. Like, you know.
I respect the hell out of what you just said. What was interesting for Panda and I is that we were the same at 36, Sonia. And so, for me, so when we had Ariella, Panda was 38, I was 36. And so when Panda was your age, she had the same view, and when I was probably 34 or 33, I had the same view, because we were just building, and we were so happy and fulfilled in our lives that we didn't even know if we would have a long-term traditional marriage with somebody, because it was like, if somebody comes in that can sort of complement each of us and add richness to our lives, then amazing. But we weren't in a position of like, I'm lonely and therefore I need someone. You know what I mean? And so we were completely at choice. And so for us, and I mean, everybody's different, right? But for us, it was meeting each other and probably meeting each other at a slightly older age as well than, most people might sort of find their primary partner at 24, 25 or whatever. It's that whole when you know. And so with us, we knew we wanted to marry one another pretty quickly. And that was the catalyst for us to go, let's definitely create more of us. Which was the exact language that we were like, more of us. And then, I think that having been through that journey myself, what I would say is that if somebody is able to have kids, which is a really sad truth that many might kind of miss the window or are unable to fall pregnant, and that's a really kind of unfortunate reality for a lot of people. If somebody is able to have children, even if it's later stages, I think it's the best thing you will ever do.
Awesome. Well, it's good advice, I guess.
Let's quickly talk about decision making and your process for making the right decisions, or the best that you can, and how quickly you make those decisions in your business.
I can summarize the job of a CEO in one word: prioritization. That's your only job. And we're all the CEO of our own life. And so whether you're talking professionally or commercially or personally, all it is prioritization. And so if I adapt that to my personal life, for example, my top 3 values are family, fitness, finance. And for me, I really think of it as mission, but mission doesn't start with an F, and so I changed it to finance. so it sits in with the other 2. And then, sometimes I might add to it fun. I'm a big AFL supporter, so fun, footy. That's pretty much it. Friends. And so what does that mean? Man, we live in a culture where everyone is obsessed with like talking about like values and intentions and goals and, like vision boards and shit like that. To my observation and experience, creating your life is very different to that. It's almost the opposite of abundance mindset. It's saying that you have to realize that you only have finite resources. You only have finite time. And so I create my top 3 values. What does that mean? That doesn't mean I live in sunshines and rainbows all day. What that means is I say no to pretty much everything else. And this comes back to the prioritization point. And so what I used to do was I used to try and do everything in business, in life, and you spread so thin that you end up getting nothing productive or constructive done. And what's been very true for me is that the more I've honed in, the more I've done the self-examination to determine what's important to me and said no to absolutely everything else, the better my life has gotten. But I want to be really clear. For a lot of people, they might look at that and think that it's boring or one-dimensional or weird or whatever. And the fundamental for me is that you can't care about what other people think. Like we live in a world where everybody wants to be exceptional, right? Which I share. I think that's an incredible goal to have. But the vast majority of people look around to everybody around them trying to acclimatize to that, which by definition means that you are trying to be average. If you want to be exceptional, you have to be the exception. And if you are the exception, then the vast majority of people around you are going to disagree or worse, criticize what it is that you're doing. And so to come back to your question, Simon, decision-making is determine what's most important in your business and your life and ruthlessly say no to everything else. People look at me and, you know, the businesses that I run, and we're expanding internationally right now. We travel a lot as a family. I take Panda on a date once a week. I take Ariella on a date once a week. And they go, Jack, how do you do it all? And the secret is it's not what I do, it's what I don't do. And so I don't manage my calendar. I don't sit in my inbox all day. I don't clean the house. I don't do laundry. I don't do dishes. I rarely drive a car. I don't remember important dates. I don't do anything that doesn't bring me closer to mission, family, or becoming the best version of myself. Why? Because it makes me better for my mission and my family. And so my underwriting principle is I only do what only I can do. Yeah. And in so doing, it makes decision-making very easy.
Jack, I always love seeing our guests that we speak to, the creators that they enjoy following and why they love following them. Who are the top 3 creators that you follow and why do you love them?
I don't know if I kind of follow creators. I tend to...
The content that's coming through your algorithm, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, what are you receiving the most?
I am a student of history. Not for any other reason than I think it can be a good foundation to stand upon to help predict the future. And my definition of intelligence is your ability to predict the future intelligently and accurately. And so, you know, the people that I kind of really look up to are people like Einstein, who kind of rewrote the way we look at the universe and understand the universe, or J.K. Rowling is a big one, even right now, because she is on X and all of that, and you can follow her today, unlike Einstein. You know, J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter, and you might think, well, how did that kind of change the world? She's attributed for doing more for childhood literacy than any other person in history. I think she's a force of nature. People like, if you go back a little bit further, Michelangelo. And so I study history to try and find great figures who have influenced the course of history, and then I try to learn as much from them as possible.
Yeah.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people would say, you know, Stephen Bartlett, or, you know, all the people that we, you know, the common answers, but that's a great answer.
And I mean, everyone you named has done something.
And I guess they're a creator in their own way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like the OG creators.
Totally.
I think there's often more. Yeah, I think there's often more to be learned by looking at people that have changed the course of history forever. And I tell you really interestingly, because that can almost sound a little bit kind of out of reach, right? I tell you why I like studying these people is the misconception that happens and occurs over time is that someone achieves something and then the history books remember them as this larger-than-life superhuman figure. And so I say Einstein, everyone goes, it's like this mythical, lived on another planet, unattainable level of genius. Or Shakespeare, right? And then when you actually study their lives and their works and their relationships and, you know, like their family, what is glaringly obvious in every single one of them is that they were all ridden with the exact same flaws and insecurities as you and I. And so by studying their actual selves and their actual stories and how they approach their life and work, you kind of go, so they really weren't superhuman. Shakespeare was just a man who wrote words. And so I think it's really important in studying the greats of history to learn that you don't have to be perfect. In fact, nobody was and nobody is to create your life and the world around you the way that you would like it.
Yeah, love it. Hey, Jack, at the end of every episode, we always ask our guests if they have an item, maybe it's in the space that you're in now, or you don't always have to have it, that is of significance that you can talk to. Have you got an item to share with us today?
I love that question. What would the best item be? I think the best item that will give you a glimpse into mine and Panda's unorthodox approach to life is this wedding ring. And so, as I said, Panda and I met each other, later on in our journey than most people might meet their partner. And we did everything in reverse. We got pregnant and consciously, it was planned. So we got pregnant. Then we got our wedding ring. Then we got engaged. Then we got married. And so, and we got this ring. It was our anniversary. And I think Panda had come to my office and we were kind of just walking to dinner here in Sydney. And we were walking past a really beautiful jewelry store. And she's just like, let's go in. And we went in and she kind of picked out these rings. And it was very impromptu, date night, anniversary. Let's buy a couple of really cool rings. And we both wore them as our wedding ring straight away, even though we weren't even engaged. And so, I think if I could kind of translate that into a lesson, I think it would be that there are no rules and you can just do stuff. There's no kind of governing body that's going to tell you what you're allowed to do and not do. I mean, obviously, unless you're breaking the law, but generally in life, we're so tied up by rules and etiquette is really just peer pressure from dead people. And so we choose to throw away the rule book and live life unconventionally. And now, thankfully, we're married, so it's got a bit more legitimacy to it.
I love that. And I mean, you let her pick the ring, so you couldn't possibly get it wrong.
Oh, yeah. No, I wouldn't pick it. It's always best when Panda makes the decision. Yeah. that's a key life
Jack,
lesson for me.
thank you so much for joining us. Just before we go, as the three of us know, any audience member that makes it this far into an episode is like an OG diehard Jack fan by now, right? Is there something specific that you want to say to somebody that's made it this far into the episode that has followed you through this episode that you want to speak directly to them?
Right now, there is a key decision in your life that you've needed to make and you've delayed making it out of fear of the consequences or fear of the discomfort that might arise when you commit to it. That stops now. Make that decision, make the phone call, make the call, make the move, and do not delay. This is where my head was going earlier, Simon, when you asked about my decision making. My head went to, it's less about the decision and more about speed to implementation. And so speed to implementation, I had it in the background as my phone for a week recently. I'm constantly talking to my team about it, which is most people kind of get enough information, kind of sort of know what they want to do, but then wait a month, 12 months, 12 years before actually doing anything about it. And making the wrong decisions are very rarely costly. It's the inertia and the delay between making the decision and acting on it that costs you, I think it's without exaggeration, often your entire life because you live in a constant state of indecision. And so we also live in a culture where everybody's obsessed with knowledge consumption. You mentioned Stephen Bartlett before. I want to listen to a podcast a week and I want to read a book a day. And it's this knowledge consumption. Learning new shit isn't going to do anything for you. At that point, learning new stuff isn't even education. It's just entertainment that feels good. And so it's not about learning new shit. It's about doing the shit you already know you should be doing. And so the one thing I'd want to leave people with, Simon, is you already know what that is in your life, and you don't need to do a course. You don't need to watch another podcast. Make this the last podcast you listen to for 30 days and get busy wrestling with the discomfort of doing that one thing that you know will significantly improve your life. And that might be cutting something off. It might be pursuing a new path. It might be a goodbye. It might be a hello. It might be starting the business. It might be having the hard conversation. I don't know what it is for you, but you do. And so just fucking do it.
Boom.
Love
Jack,
it.
thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, mate.
Thanks, guys. It was a really good conversation. I appreciate it.